I'm gonna put my whole computer on do not disturb really quickly. I don't know how to do that. So I'm not gonna. I'll just ignore everything. Come on, ADHD person. Hyperfocus. Here we go.
Here we go.
Welcome to the True North podcast, where two practicing light workers get together every week to continue an ongoing conversation about wholeness and healing for body and mind so that you can follow your true north back to your true self. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Abby.
How are you today? I've never seen that mug before. That's an interesting one. Is that new?
No, this is just a coffee mug, and usually I'm drinking tea, but if you want to know how I am, I'm drinking coffee in the middle of the day.
And choking on it. I'm gonna give Abby a second to collect her thoughts. That is not just a coffee mug. It's kind of a murder weapon right now. Well, I mean, look at it. It's all like
choking me up.
Yeah, people need to YouTube this just to see this coffee mug. It's obviously handcrafted.
Yeah, it's fancy.
I like it.
Thank you.
I like it a lot. All right, well, I think I already know the answer to this question, but what do you got today? Do you have stuff today?
Well, I want to talk about this continuing thing that you got going on over here in the show notes, which is on continuing to do your thing.
Yes, I was hoping you would say that.
Well, fantastic. Let's do it.
Where is it? Okay, so this... I don't even know how to intro this.
What, the feedback where we've lost some listeners and so now?
Well, no. I mean, that is at the very top of it. I've said this in the gratitude before, but I can feel myself moving to a place where I have a new, like I've unlocked another level of confidence about my work. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk about that because I'm learning that that's not a place that people who are making a thing often arrive at. Or at least I haven't met a lot of people who are there. Like, and this is a fairly new thing for me because even a month ago I was talking about how heavily weighted feedback is for me and how much I base my opinion of myself and my work on that. And I think saying that out loud has caused some huge shifts in me to investigate that and investigate why and how and all that stuff and kind of break from it. And I think it's noteworthy that we have lost several listeners in the last month or so. And some of them have told me why, some of them haven't. And the reason it's noteworthy is because at no point did that feedback ever make me question if we should keep doing the podcast. And that's a new feeling.
Okay.
To have that kind of unassailability. Because my knee-jerk reaction for most of my life is I do a thing, I get negative feedback, and my first response is to shut it down. Mm-hmm. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I thought it was noteworthy how, like, people would say, I even had someone say, I would have stopped listening by now based on the content alone if we weren't friends. like straight up, I'm just supporting you, you know? And as a 4, it was kind of frustrating to me how none of that hurt.
You're saying you wanted to suffer.
I expected it to. Mm-hmm. And there's a part of me that felt like it should. Mm-hmm. And when people are like, oh yeah, I stopped listening a while ago. Or like when we would lose, like a patron would just be like, I don't think this is for me anymore, and just like unsubscribe. Mm-hmm. Right? I tell myself the story that stuff should hurt.
Okay.
And then when it doesn't, I feel like I have nothing to fill that space with. Like what, there's no pain? Like I felt a little robbed, you know? And then what really, really made me want to talk about this was I'm in a screenwriting class. And so what we do is we write stuff and then we dissect it in this group Zoom call class. And I've got the pilot to this thing written. Well, almost the pilot. I've got 53 pages of the first episode of this thing. And the professor took the thing, he wrote notes all over it, and we spent an hour going over this in class. And I noticed that anytime he would offer a critique or point out something that could be improved or made better, he was like softening the blow or prefacing it. And I had to interrupt him and say, it is very hard to hurt my feelings. And then he would be like, okay. So then he kind of like dug in a little bit deeper or kind of like got a little bit more unapologetic with his critique. And then later he even said in front of the class, he was like, I know Ryan pretends to have this thick skin, but he's an artist and I know artists. And I had to go back and say, look, this is a class. If you're the professor and I present you with my work and you don't tear it apart, then I'm not getting my money's worth. So like, look at the work. Don't look at me. Just talk about the thing, and I want to learn from it. But then the chats in the Zoom call started flooding with people talking about how if someone said about their screenplay what he's saying about mine, they would rip it up. And again, I was like, why am I not bothered? And so after thinking about this and noodling on it and talking to my therapist about it for an hour, I kind of discovered some stuff that's going on in here that I thought would be helpful and useful to share with anybody who's ever made a thing and gotten feedback on it, positive or negative.
I think it's a very, very curious question as to why are you trying to make it be something that it's not?
Well, I think I'm just noticing that it's not something that I expected it to be.
This is just a new place for you to be in?
Yeah, it's uncharted territory, and it's... Oh, I just made a connection. This morning at 4:30 a.m., I had the weirdest experience.
Okay.
I realized that I was awake and had been awake for some time, but I don't remember waking up.
Okay.
Has that ever happened to you? Like, when you wake up, when you're dreaming and then you wake up, or when like you know when you just woke up, right? But last night, I don't ever remember having an experience like this, but I remember just laying there with my eyes closed, as though like when you're trying to go to sleep, and thinking, how long have I been laying here not sleeping? Am I awake right now? And I open my eyes and look around like, yeah, I am awake. And I feel like I've been awake for a while. But that's never happened to me before. I just all of a sudden realized I was in a different state of existence, but never really noticed the transition. And in the same way, I've just noticed that all of a sudden, almost like a flip switched, it just doesn't, I don't feel the need to defend myself, or I don't feel attacked when people state not positive opinions about the stuff I do. It's like, that's just not part of the process.
That's you practicing being in your own business too. If you're not caring or putting stock in what they think about what you're producing, if what you're producing is from your heart, then maybe that's just what you're shifting to.
I do care. A lot of times, sometimes the caring is in different places, but like I've had some people whose opinion I care about a great deal tell me, one of our patrons even was like, I probably wouldn't listen to this if it wasn't for you. I've had 2 of our patrons said that. I'm talking about 2 different people who both said that to me, and there's a part of me that hears that like, oh, our content itself isn't good enough for them to stick around. But then I thought, good enough or just their flavor enough, and but even when it's somebody whose opinion I care about, I'll take the feedback and I'll weigh it against my own opinion of the thing, and I'll come up with my own assessment of their assessment, whether either it matches or it doesn't, or maybe there's a blind spot I have, or maybe my assessment's a little bit off and could stand to look more like theirs or whatever. But at no point in that process is there an emotional reaction.
How long has this been happening?
Well, that would be like if you were to ask me this morning how long I had been awake. I want to say at least a couple weeks. I mean, if someone, for those of you who are still listening, if you have been listening to the progression of the last few episodes, there have been moments where I've talked about this type of thing. It's like I've been laying down pavers, but only thinking about that one paver, and now I'm turning around and saying, "Oh, there's a whole path. Where'd that come from?" The whole getting feedback, realizing that you helped me realize how dependent I am on feedback of others to form my opinion about myself. And that was like 4 or 5 weeks ago. And slowly, I've just been kind of shedding that skin, and I don't know. And then we did that episode on confidence, and we talked about confidence is knowing exactly where you stand, the good, the bad, or the ugly. Someone tells me, like, one of the things that my professor said while picking apart my screenplay was that I'm an amazing writer. And out loud I said thank you, but internally I said I know. It didn't bolster my opinion of myself. I didn't feel better about my writing because he said that, but I also didn't feel worse about my writing when he pointed out the flaws. I just knew that it was what it was. You know?
Yeah.
And that feeling is so new to me.
Well, I also wonder if it has something to do with, I think right now you're in a creative flow, right? And it's interesting because you're in this place of that Venn diagram that I like to share all the time, with discipline on one side, surrender on the other side, and flow is in the middle where they come together. The discipline side is you're in the structure of time deadlines, class, professor deadlines, like that's your discipline, right? You have to do it within this time, but you're also then surrendering to that process. So then what's coming out of it is this creative flow. And we talk a lot about flow states, and my job as a coach when I meet my clients is helping them figure out what their flow state is so that we can align activities and people in their life that makes them brings those feeling states that come along with their individualized flow. And so to me, I feel like you're describing exactly what happens when you line yourself up with flow. And not saying that you're in that way in all areas of your life, right? I get that. That's not really the point, but I'm just curious and wondering if perhaps part of this shift back to your own business is because you're meeting your needs, which is your state of flow in some area of your life. I don't know.
Yes. And part of that, I think a lot of that has to do with school, because I said this last time I went to art school before I dropped out, was I loved that I had an external motivation just to do the shit. Like I have to produce a thing that's going to get a grade.
Right.
So I didn't need my internal motivation to sit down and make art. I had someone else telling me to do it, and someone was writing on it. So I made art. And then when I found out that I was doing the art, then I found that I loved doing the art. Right. And so it's kind of a similar thing where now I'm in a screenwriting course and I was prompted to come up with this story. And then now I have this thing that I believe in so much. I'm shopping it to HBO Max as soon as I get it pitch worthy. Right. And so there's something to be said about doing things that kick you into a state of generativity instead of waiting for it to happen on its own. And knowing that when you start, it's not going to feel like flow.
Right. Well, and that's the discipline part, and then the surrender of just like, oh, you got to do it, right? But you are an artist that's making art, so in some ways, this doesn't surprise me that you've landed here, because now it's become, like you said, in the beginning it was hard, but now I think you're like far enough into it where you're in deep, knee deep in the creative process, and there's something to show for it, and you have progress and you have movement. Yeah.
Right. And so I want to talk specifically to anybody who is a maker of things. And I don't want to like limit it to just like art people. I don't like the word creative. I like the word generative, because to me they mean the same thing, but they're not attached to the same things, if that makes sense. I don't know. We can go into that. There's so many things that people do that I would call their art that they wouldn't. And so I'm going to talk about this through the lens of art, because you just said, like, I'm an artist and I'm making art. And even if you're not an artist, there's something that you do. There's something that's life-bringing. There's something that you're making. And if these things can transpose into that, then that's my hope. But I really want to focus in on doubt. Like when to reasons to do your thing, and reasons to not, and when to do it and when to not. Because, like I said at the beginning of this, when we started this podcast, if I got an ounce of negative feedback, I would have gone to be like, oh, this was a bad idea. We should stop before we embarrass ourselves. And there is that impulse to immediately accept negative feedback and immediately reject positive feedback. And it's the negativity bias that we talk about, and it takes, 10 good comments to equal one bad comment, and as far as the way you react to it. And so that's natural. But it's also not the best way to be, to instantly jump into, should I stop everything because somebody told you they didn't like it? Just like you shouldn't say, oh, I'm going to keep doing this just because somebody told you they did. And so there's this weird dichotomy of you make a thing, you show it to people, they give you feedback, and then somehow that helps determine the course of your future relationship with that thing that started out just between you and you. Mm-hmm. And so if we don't use other people's feedback as reasons to keep doing it or reasons to stop, then what reasons do we have? And that's what I made my little outline about.
Perfect. Well, let's jump in.
Okay, so the first reason to do your thing is because it brings you life. And ultimately, that's really the only reason. There are other reasons I wrote here that will help you hone in on that, but that's the reason to do the thing, is it brings you life. And it's hard to describe what that feels like what you're talking about with the state of flow. There's just something where you know it when you feel it, you know? And so I say the phrase brings you life, knowing that that's a pretty esoteric concept, because, you know, we're alive. What does it mean to bring life, you know? But it's just kind of a thing that, like, you know it when you feel it, when something makes you feel alive. You know what I mean?
Yes. And I think that, you know, you can ask yourself the question, what did I do as a child where I lost all sense of time?
Yes.
And that's where you can figure out what brings you life. And it's not necessarily that particular activity. Like for me, it was building forts and doing stuff. Like I'm not going to go build forts today in my adult life, but there was something that when I was doing that, I can go back and think about how it made me feel. That's the concept of it brings you life, those feeling states. But that's how you can identify those, because that's when you go back to childhood and you think about that flow state, and you can dive into how that feels, how it made you feel, who it made you become. That's kind of the unconditioned self that you can tap into for guidance on what feels like making you feel alive. Yes, absolutely. Because when we're little kids, there's no question in our minds about who and what we are. Right. Maybe we're limited in our tools and guardrails for expressing who we are, but we know who we are. And when we do the things, they are a reflection of who we are. Mm-hmm. And so you can tap back into that, and you're at least going to be in the ballpark, if not, you know, on the bullseye. Right. To confuse two different sport metaphors. Another reason I gave was to elicit reactions, both negative and positive. Because a lot of the things that we do are audience oriented. Like you can write music for yourself, and that's fine. But at some point, you're going to want to share something with somebody. Mm-hmm. And I find that my art is alive in the making, and it becomes alive again in the sharing. We talked about how I used to burn my art because it was dead as soon as I was done making it. But you know what I did with the art when I was done making it? I hung it up on my own wall. Mm-hmm. So, of course, it was dead. If I put it in a gallery or something, it would have been alive. So, like, there are different states of matter, and I think there are different states of life for your art. And there's a certain type of life that it is when it's being made, and there's another type of life that it takes on when it's being shared. And it's not just to get reactions from people to help you hone your content. Like, oh, this is something everybody likes, so I'm going to do more of it. Or this is something nobody likes, so I'm going to do less of it. But rather, you want to get feedback to help you realize how useless it is. Both positive and negative. Like, one of my favorite Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, he journaled about intentionally wearing clothing that was decidedly untasteful at the time, so that he could elicit negative feedback from people, so that he could realize how little it matters to him. You have to get critique. You have to get negative feedback. It's not just about resilience to it and developing a thick skin, because if you have thick skin, nothing gets through. You want the stuff to get through. But you also don't want it to matter more than it actually should. It matters a certain amount. There's an appropriate level of mattering that other people's feedback has, and it's not zero. But I have a tendency to take people's feedback and make it matter a whole lot more than is appropriate for that feedback. And it takes getting a lot of positive and a lot of negative. You're basically just collecting data to then be able to get a perspective on how to orient yourself towards it. And so one of the reasons to do your thing, to keep doing your thing when you get positive feedback, and keep doing your thing when you get negative feedback, is to keep getting feedback until you have enough feedback that you realize how little it actually matters compared to how much you maybe made it matter in the beginning. I don't agree with that.
Okay.
I think the feedback should not govern what you do, not govern the reasons why you do something, positive or negative.
I feel like I feel like
you
that.
contradicted yourself. I feel like you said you shouldn't listen to it, but then you said that it's there and you should get it to know that it's not important.
It is not. It is neither important nor not important. It is as important as it is. It's
so then
not
feedback
zero.
should
So
be
like
irrelevant.
Well, no. I'm saying that like on 100 to 0 scale, 0 is feedback is not important. 100 is anything people say I should do, I'm going to do. On that scale, I place people's feedback usually at about a 20. For some people, it's closer to an 80. But before I created this scale and started living that way, all the feedback was at 100. So it's not so black and white. It's not that it matters or it doesn't, or you should listen to it or you shouldn't, or it's relevant or it's irrelevant. It is precisely as relevant as it is, which is not 0, but not 100.
But
and when you gather,
is somebody else's business.
I mean, it is, but like we said a few episodes ago, really all of our business is all of our business. We're all in this together. Everything we do affects everybody else. Everything everybody else does affects us. And so in a way, their business is our business. If 100% of the people who listen to our podcast had the exact same feedback about our podcast, I would be inclined to believe that it was true. So, what I'm saying is, it matters, but it probably doesn't matter as much as we make it matter to us. If one person says, this is a shitty podcast, that's not going to matter a lot to me. But there was a time that if one person said that, it would matter 100%. That one feedback would make me question the entire thing. So you want to gather feedback. You want to get positive. You want to get negative. Not to teach you that it's irrelevant, but to show you just how little it matters, which is still non-zero, but definitely not 100.
Okay.
How does that sit with you?
I still think feedback should be a 0.
Okay, that's fair. So, another reason to keep doing your thing is to get through the shit to get to the gold. Quantity over quality. Just do the thing and keep doing the thing. And we've talked about it a lot. We've told stories. We've given allegories. I think that's something that you and I can sync up on. You do your thing, and then you do your thing again. And then you do your thing again, and you do your thing again. And you just keep doing it. Because usually you have your vision and you have the act, and it's not the vision that needs critiquing, it's the craftsmanship, right? And you learn craftsmanship by repeatedly doing it. And so the more you do a thing, the more closely your actions can lead to the vision, and eventually you can start producing a thing that's really in there, and you're not limited by your capability to render it in the world. Which is kind of an important part of being able to make a thing, is to be able to make a thing that you set out to make. Nothing's more frustrating than being an artist and having a thing in your head and then drawing it and it doesn't match up and it's not good enough, and you try, but like your skills just aren't there, you know? So
it goes back to that example you talked about. It's been a while now, about the art class, the progress versus perfection. Right. You know, quality versus quantity. The one piece you make, which is supposed to be the end all be all, but you can't really make that without the quantity.
Right. And the quantity is the gateway, right? Even Rob, when we interviewed Rob, he said he has whole books on his hard drive that are never going to get published because they're just not that good. But he had to get through them to get to the good stuff.
Exactly.
You know, I wrote a feature-length screenplay, and it was like objectively not good. And I'm not sitting here like beating myself up over it. I tell people that and they're like, no, I'm sure it was good. It's not. It's just fucking not good. And I'm fine with that because every good screenwriter will tell you that their first screenplay was shit. When I wrote it, I thought it was good. But now looking back, I'm like, oh no, I'm really glad I didn't shop this around. It needs work. But having done that and learned from it, I'm able to now produce a thing that I do believe in. And I feel like I had to write that horrible screenplay to get here. And then I'm going to look back on this one and think, oh, here are all the problems with this. And that's fine, you know? But if I hadn't just gotten that one out of my system, then this one might be that shitty one, you know? So another reason to do your thing is just to hone the craft. Which I'm going to say something later that's going to sound like it's contradicting this. But it doesn't. But it's going to sound like it is. So just put a pin in that.
Okay.
And then the last and most important thing, which is tied to it brings you life, is that you'll discover yourself in ways through doing your thing that I would venture to guess you couldn't without it.
That's a good.
And by that I mean a lot of people in my life recommend journaling as just a practice of self-exploration, self-therapy, whatever. And I just can't get into it. There's so many 2-week-long journaling blocks on in various note-taking things where I started it and did it for a while and then it just fell off. And then there's always that one that's like, oh, it's been a while, here's an update, and then that's almost like a ritual. That's the last one for years. But I realized that for me, screenwriting does what journaling does, or is what I imagined journaling was supposed to do. And I have my reservations with journaling is that it just feels so self-aggrandizing. Again, I'm a straight white dude. I'm kind of averse to doing anything that would make it seem like just, my aimless inner musings are important, and that's my own shit. That's me being overly sensitive to something. But I just can't get into it. Nothing comes out of it. It doesn't do anything. It's like when people start meditating and I'm like, how did it do? And they're like, oh, it didn't do anything. And I get maybe it's about the practice. But when I do my screenwriting, holy shit, there's stuff in there. Every single character in this pilot is me. Every single, there's a father and a son, and they're written from the perspective of who I was when I felt like I was being fathered by my father, and also the father is written by who I am, how I feel about myself as a father to my son. So it's me and me, and they're all me. And I'm looking at these people, and I'm experiencing their dialogue and their interactions, and I'm reading it back to myself, and I literally am reading myself back to myself. And it's more of a self-portrait than even I realized. And I'm able to, oh man, it's so rich with shit to mine, to learn about myself, and to look at this thing and be, oh, that's in there. Oh, that's how I feel about that. Oh, that's what's going on. And then you can start to make some real world connections in your life. For me, screenwriting is therapy, right? And because right now screenwriting is the thing. It hasn't always been a thing, and for a while there it was. I wrote, there were a whole bunch of songs that came out of nowhere at once, and that. But I still live by the philosophy that every portrait is a self-portrait. All the things you make are a reflection of you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so when you do the thing, you're putting your essence into action, into tangible reality, and then you interact with the thing that you made. You discover things about yourself, and you learn about yourself, and you can dig in ways that I don't know you could without having this tangible expression to interact with.
I like it.
So it brings you life to elicit reactions, positive and negative, just for the sake of getting to the point where you can actually do it well, and then discovering who you are. Those are the reasons I think, personally, to do the thing. So when somebody gives you feedback, or you start to doubt, or you think something's going to land well and it doesn't, and you think, oh, I shouldn't, I would run it through those things. Say, does this meet those? Because if it does, then just keep on doing it. And then I also have reasons to stop. And this one was really, really tough for me because stopping never really feels like stopping. Sometimes it feels like pausing. Oh, and I actually forgot. There was another one. No, hold on. I'm going to write it and I'm going to say it. When the work is complete, some things are finite. They just are. And I don't know that we build enough space in our lives for the acceptance of that.
Can you also say that some people are complete? Some relationships, I should say, not people.
Are finite? Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, I recently listened to a series of interviews with. Actually, I don't know if I should share that. I'll say this. Generally speaking, if somebody has had multiple marriages, the sentiment is that maybe they're not the best at marriage. Or maybe they shouldn't be giving marriage advice. And that idea comes from the idea that maybe they're not that successful in marriage. But then the idea of success is tied to longevity, right? You have old couples who've been married for decades upon decades. How did you do it? How are you so successful in your marriage? That's a problem to me. Because there's so many other metrics by which you can measure success in a marriage. Were you authentic? Did you have boundaries? Did you show up for the other person, et cetera, et cetera? Did you learn about each other? Did you both want the same things? Things like that. And those have nothing to do with how long the marriage lasts. And a lot of the reasons that we get into the marriages are story arcs that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in a lot of cases, when those story arcs end and you learn the thing that this relationship was here to help you learn, there's really no need to have the relationship anymore. And staying in it may stunt your growth past that point or the other person's. And so if longevity is no longer the goal and no longer your marker of success, then I wonder what other markers of success you might find. And I wonder how much more healthy those might be. Like, do I have your back for as long as we're here to have each other's backs? You know, do I want for you what you want for you? Things like that exist in the present. And then if it runs its course, well, you know, every movie has opening credits and end credits. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean it doesn't break people's hearts. But yeah, I think there are, like I said, there are things in life that are finite, and we don't really leave room to accept the finiteness of those things. And so one reason to stop doing your thing is when it's course, when you've completed the work. Sometimes I set out to do a creative endeavor, and when I do it, I have no need to do it anymore. It's done. For a while, I was a professional calligrapher. I did calligraphy paintings. I did calligraphy wall art. I almost did a wedding invitation thing. And I can still do calligraphy decently. But it ran its course. It lasted like a year. I got a couple gigs. I did a couple things. I learned the lessons. I took the classes. I got the equipment. And then when it was time to put the pen down, it was time to put the pen down. I don't need to pick it up again. I don't need to market myself as a calligrapher. I can just know that I have good handwriting when I want to have good handwriting, and you know, I gave my calligraphy stuff to somebody else. But when it was my thing, that was my fucking thing. That was my thing, man. So one reason to stop is if it's run its course. When the work is complete. When the thing you came here to do is done. And owning that and just letting it be over is so fucking scary sometimes, but it's so freeing when you do.
Is there an indication of knowing when something is complete? And not in an art project way, but as you said, you know, when you came to the end of your calligraphy stint, how did you know that was the end?
And this brings me to my second one, which may not work for relationships per se. In fact, I'm going to start off by saying this is not my answer for knowing when a relationship has run its course. But as far as an art thing, at least to answer your question about calligraphy, and I can map this onto a couple other things artistically in my life that have come to a conclusion, is when it started feeling like work and became a life stealer instead of a life giver.
So now, define work.
Well, see, good. Well, feeling like work is the thing. Feeling like work. Because this right here, the YouTube are the only people who are going to see this. This is going to eventually become a paper crafted pickup truck as a set piece for a 3D stop motion animation I'm making. And this little guy takes work. It takes like a lot of work. And I got to be very careful. Got to get my craftsman hands out, put in my earbuds, ignore the world, and sit down for 8, 10, 12 hours at a time, if it's available to me, and just fucking work on the thing. But at no point in the time does it feel like work. Like you said, time flies. You lose track of time. You lose track of self. You don't check your watch. Nobody else exists. It is work, but it doesn't feel like work. And with calligraphy, the life that was there that fueled me going and spending money and spending time on it, the life force behind it was just sucked dry at some point. And then all that was left was the doing. And because I didn't have that element there to make time go away and to put my blinders on and to get me all wrapped up in the passion of the thing, that's how I knew that the life was gone. And so when it feels like work, that's because the life force that drove it has expired. And I'm not saying if something feels like work, stop doing it, because some things just fucking feel like work. You know, like sweeping the floor is never going to be fun. It's always going to feel like work. I'm not saying if it feels like work, don't do it. But specifically speaking about the things in your life that you put in your life because they bring you life. The generative things that are your passion things. When those things start feeling like work, then maybe that means that it's run its course. Maybe not. Maybe you need to pause. Maybe you need to evaluate, like you said earlier, what about this is life-giving? And when did it become not that? And maybe I can set some boundaries. Maybe something got injected into the thing that then sucked the life out. And if I draw boundaries around this, I can prevent the life suckers from entering the thing so that it's only a life-giving thing. You know? And a lot of times getting paid for a thing can suck the life out of it. There's some things that I can do that I will intentionally refuse to get paid for, because I know that getting paid sucks the life out of it. And so I have a boundary there. There are certain things I just have boundaries around. I'm not going to let you pay me for this. I probably won't even do it for you. You know, because that's how I preserve the life-givingness of the thing. And that doesn't mean it's run its course. Calligraphy may come back, because you know what I love doing? I love writing pretty stuff. I love just making pretty letters. That's what I love doing. And what made it...
So you've redefined it.
Yes. And then I've taken to the point where, like, I don't need to be a professional calligrapher to get enjoyment out of writing pretty things. So I took that element out, and all of a sudden, now when I write pretty things, it doesn't feel like work. And the life got injected back into it, because I found where the life really was. But you have to stop doing it, kind of to give yourself some distance, to give yourself perspective, to ask yourself those questions. Because when you're in the middle of it and all you're doing is drowning in self-imposed workload, it's really hard to then evaluate where it went wrong along the way. You know, sometimes you just have to get through the thing. You just have to complete the order. I have to complete this calligraphy assignment that I took on and that's due in a week. You know, and when you're in that mode, that's not the time to evaluate whether or not you should have taken on that assignment. So you need distance. And so that's a good reason to stop. Not permanently, not stop forever, but just to stop. Is when it starts to feel like work.
So in that case, you finish that particular assignment, and then if another one presents itself, you
say no.
Say no. Okay.
Or like in my case, you say no to literally everything in your whole entire goddamn life. That's here's another way to say when it feels like work: when you're burnt out. That's a word I think people can, that's something that's flying around, right? Burnout. When you're burnt out, that's what it is. You had the life and you had the work, and the life made the work not feel like work, and the life left and all you had was the work, and then it started to feel like work because the life was the thing that made it not feel like work. And so you lost the life and all you have is the work. That's how you know you're burnt out. Take a break, stop, pull back, find where the life is, and start there again, and draw a boundary so that you can have the life without having the work that made the life leave. That's my equation. I don't know if that works for everybody, but it works for me.
Okay.
Another reason is if it becomes unsustainable. Now this one's really tricky. And this goes back to something we were talking about last week. If there's just no room in your life for it, right? How many times have people say, like, I want to be a painter, I want to do paintings, but I don't have any time. Or I can't because XYZ. Or here are all the reasons why it's not a thing I can do. And you have a choice. Either you can choose not to do it, and you don't have the life giver in your life, or you can choose to do it, and then other things start to fall apart. So at some point, it's just not sustainable because you haven't made room for it. And this is a deeper issue for me, because really what you're saying is I just can't bring myself to prioritize this over the other things that are prioritized. And that just comes down to a choice, which goes back to what we were saying last time about like, if you wanted it bad enough, you would make room for it. Right? And so what you're really saying is, I don't want this bad enough. And in my experience with me and other people that I have worked with in a professional healing capacity, oftentimes the thing that prevents somebody from making space in their life for the things that bring them life come from feeling like they're not valuable enough as a person. Because ultimately the thing that brings you life is an act of self-love. And if you can't make room in your life to love you, oftentimes that comes from a feeling that you are not worth being loved by you. It comes down to self-worth. And you have to start from a place of believing that you yourself are a thing worth cultivating at the expense of you cultivating other people. And if you're not there yet, then your passion will always be a side gig. It'll always be dispensable. It'll always be the first thing to go when something else gets in the way, rather than an integrated part of the life you design for yourself. I feel like the passion, life-giving things should be a cornerstone of the foundation upon which you build your life. But if you just tack it on like an add-on, it's not sustainable. It's going to get in the way of something, or it's going to just drop off. And I've seen that has a direct correlation with how much you value yourself. I don't remember who it was. I think it was Brene who encouraged people to ask the question: is saying yes to you saying no to me?
Anyway, go ahead.
I attribute a lot of stuff to Brene Brown. But yeah, if saying yes to somebody else is saying no to yourself, then say no to them. Again, really hard to do, really scary. But that's where it starts. And the thing that's built on is valuing yourself. So if it becomes unstable, unsustainable, if the thing that you want to do or the thing that you're trying to do is just making everything unwieldy, then pause on that thing until you can get a grip on what your real values are, what your real priorities are, and how you can build a life, even if it's from the ground up, that inherently has room for this thing. And again, that comes back down to boundaries, because you got to say no to a lot of shit. Which comes with practice. Again, do it a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, sidebar, that gets a lot easier. I've said no to 3 people this week. I think maybe it was last week.
Your quantity has built your quality. Your
Yes.
quantity in saying no has made it easier to say no.
Yes. And the quality of the no has also improved. Because when I first started saying no, it was like using a Cheeto as a deadbolt. Like, oh no, I can't do this. Okay, fine. Yes, I can. And then it became, oh, here's a paragraph. Like you said, when I voxed you to tell you no, it was a 15-minute fucking vox explaining why I was saying no. You know? And so, like, legit, I committed to be a part of a group of people to help form this larger group that's similar to our tribe. And it was like a once a month meeting for an hour to like just kind of talk. It was all a bunch of working professionals who had their own job, but it could like input into this thing in a way that was meaningful to help the guys steering the ship steer the ship better. And we had a meeting, and 15 minutes before the meeting, I got on Zoom with the guy leading it, and I was like, I can't commit to this. Like, I'm sorry that I committed to it. But if I keep saying I'm going to be a part of this, I'm going to keep finding reasons and excuses to not come to these meetings, because ultimately it's just not aligned with me. It's not important enough to me for me to prioritize it over other things. And so I'm just going to name that and respectfully bow out. And I got nothing but respect in return. He was like, do you know how many people wouldn't tell me that? And so he was like grateful. And I wasn't even at a point where I was afraid that he would get upset. But I was just like, it was also encouraging that he didn't. He supported it. And he was like, I'm really glad to see that you're drawing that boundary. And then the next day I had someone ask me for to teach some animation stuff and like do a little like one-on-one tutorial teaching thing. And I legit just straight up told her, hey, I have to say no to a lot of things right now so that I can say yes to other things, and this is going to be a no. Straight up. And it's getting easier to do that because I've had to do it a lot. But that's what I talk about when I'm talking about setting boundaries. I'm talking about designing your life around what you want to be in it. You have to say no to the things that you don't want to be in it.
Well, if you don't say no, those things that you don't really want to do will fill up your time and not make room for the things that you want to do.
Yes.
The life-giving things you're talking about.
Right. And so if the life-giving thing makes your life unsustainable, go ahead and put it to the side long enough to cultivate your skill in saying no to things that are not life-giving. And then you'll find that you have room for the thing that is. And then you can put it back. But I have seen people who like started doing a thing and then it just became unwieldy and everything fell apart. And so that's a good sign to pause it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so reasons to keep doing the thing. It brings you life. Keep doing it to elicit reactions. To figure out how to prioritize those, whether it should be 20% or 0%. That's up to the person. That's up to you. Do it a lot to get through the shit to get to the gold. Do it a lot because you'll discover in ways that you probably couldn't if you could. You probably couldn't if you didn't do the thing. Reasons to stop when the work is complete, when it feels like work / burnout, or when it becomes unsustainable in your current life. Now, how are you feeling about all this? Other than all the other ways you've already said how you feel about all this.
Me?
Yeah.
In particular, you're talking to me. Well, of course you're talking to me.
This whole episode has been True North with Ryan.
Yeah, right. So I am. Yes, this is your process. So
okay.
I'm not going to break it down today.
Okay. I hope this is helpful for people. But also, here are the other things. I have 5 more points that are neither the do it or don't do it camp, but they're just worth saying when it comes down to doing your thing, whatever doing your thing looks like. First, you don't have to do it professionally. There's this idea in some type of skill sets that if you have any modicum of aptitude for it, you should go to school for it, you should get trained, you should pay money, you should get certified, you should compete, you should perform, you should blah, 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 make money, make it your thing. Put yourself on the map, that whole story. And that's all bullshit. You don't have to do it professionally. Even if you're doing professional quality stuff, you just don't have to. There's this idea that if you're good at a thing, you should look into making money doing it. You know, how many times have you seen somebody who makes really awesome baked goods and someone says, what do they say? You should open a bakery, right? You're really good at crafting. What do people say? You should open up an Etsy store. Like, we immediately go to make money on it. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. It's fine if you do. Obviously, tons of people do it. But you don't have to. And that just needs to be said. You don't have to do it vocationally. You don't. You can, but you don't have to. And that goes to the second thing, which is similar, but you don't owe anyone else your gifts. And that is a huge one for me. I grew up just naturally good at figuring out how to play piano. I can play piano in a way that makes you think I'm better than I actually am. And as a kid, anytime someone was in a room with me and a piano, there was always someone who would be like, hey, you should go play something. You should go play the piano. Right? Like I'm a human fucking jukebox. And I know that it was encouragement. It was support. It was, you have these gifts and I support these gifts and I love hearing you play and I get enjoyment out of it. And it was all positive stuff. But my internal little brain was like, my creative expression is not bespoke to your self-imposed lack of talent. If you want to hear some piano, learn how to play it and play it yourself. Like, it was very much a, like, I am not a dancing monkey. And that was where I was then. I'm not really there now. If someone was like, you should play piano, I'm like, okay, well, let's do a duet. We're gonna do this together. I'm gonna loop you into it and we're gonna have fun. But there was a huge chunk of my life where I felt like I had talents and everybody else felt like I owed them those talents. You should do this on a stage. You should do this in front of people. You should share your gift with the world. Fuck that. If you want to, do it. But you don't owe anybody your talent. It's your talent. Also, just thought that needed to be said.
Okay.
And also in these veins, these are all kind of the same thing, but I just feel like they each deserve their own little rant, their own little soapbox. I know how you love it when I soapbox, is you don't have to be good at it either. Again, there's this narrative, especially with performing arts. Like, you get a kid that can move their body, that can like has some rhythm and can step. You immediately want to put them in like dance classes. or like, you know, you should get like, again, like the first one, like you should get trained, you should join a class or hone those skills. Or, you know, if someone's a painter and they're not very good, we kind of have this idea in our head that they should work towards being good at it. You know, like there's a goal of being good at painting. But we're not like that with everything. You know, like if you're really good at running, you could probably win some races, but we don't see people jogging in a park and think, oh, you're so good at running, you should do that professionally. You should go try to race. You should get a trainer. No, they're doing it for their health, or just because they enjoy it, or to get away, right? Why can't people just dance in their living room and do it badly for their own enjoyment? Mm-hmm. Why can't somebody make a painting that looks like garbage just because they love the joy of painting? And maybe they're sticking it to the man by making it intentionally look like garbage. You don't know. Like there's some things that people do where people like feel like there's this gravitational pull towards doing it, towards being good at it. And you don't have to. You don't have to do anything to make yourself good at a thing. Now, this is the thing I thought might sound contradictory, because earlier I was like, get through the quantity so you can get to the quality, and you want to have high quality, and that's fine, because if you want to have high quality stuff, then quantity is the way to do it. But you don't have to want to make high quality stuff. Mm-hmm. And also...
quality just happens because of the quantity.
Yes. And who's deciding what's good or not? You know, like saying you don't have to be good at it is kind of a misnomer, because what's the measuring stick of what makes something good? Mm-hmm. Usually the only thing that people use is, do other people like it a lot? If a lot of people respond positively to it, it's good, right? So the whole idea of being good at something is kind of rooted in an external locus of value, right? And there's certain things that go into the things you make that you can't assess on any type of numerical objective scale. You know, mm-hmm. Jim Carrey is a painter. He has paintings that are in galleries. If you didn't know he painted them, or if you did and you don't care who he is, you might look at those paintings and think, oh, my kid could paint that. And you might actually have a kid who can paint that shit. But he's communicating so much of an intangible essence in those paintings that they have a value and an intrinsic worth. Not because he's a celebrity, not because he's Jim Carrey, but because of what he as a human being poured into them. That you can't really put a dollar sign on. You can't really assess quality. You can't say that's a good painting or that's a bad painting, because it's a slice of another human being. And so pursuing the idea of being good at something is really just pursuing the idea of solidifying an external measuring stick of quality to your work. And then, oh, no, that's all. That's all I have. That's all I wrote down. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
And so that process is kind of what you've been working through as, like you said, we've lost some listeners to the feedback from them, and then your screenplay being picked apart. Are you saying like this process is why you aren't affected by it?
Well, remember at the beginning when I said I feel like for the last few weeks I've been laying down some pavers and I'm just now turning around and seeing the path? Mm-hmm. Everything I just went through is the path. It's what I'm turning around and looking at and saying, oh, this is all the stuff that's going on in here that's gotten me to a place where I have a different measuring stick for the quality of my work. Because before, it was very clear that 95% of my measuring stick of the quality of anything I did was other people's reactions to it. I would write a song. I would not say whether I thought it was good or bad until I got feedback from at least 8 or 9 people. Mm. And then my opinion of that song was directly correlated with the amalgamation of that feedback. That's no longer where I am. And I think all of these things play into what got me there and what it looks like to be there. Because it comes down to why. Why do I do the thing that I do? And how do I assess the value and the quality of my work? And my answers to those questions over the past month or so, I've brought them home. My why is in here now. It's not out there. My measuring stick for assessing the quality and the value of my work is in here. It's not out there. Well, I guess to be fair, it's 20% out there because that's where I value the feedback of most people. I'll incorporate it, but it's not a pretty heavily weighted variable in my equation. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's what that looks like. That's what that looks like, or at least what I think it looks like to arrive at that place where it feels more. I'm just going to say the word confident.
Okay. Awesome.
Anyway, that's what I've been up to the last week or so. All my introspection has gotten me to that little thing.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing. So besides being grateful for that, what are you grateful for?
Why didn't I prepare for that? Okay. Well, you know what I'm going to say? And it's just going to throw a monkey wrench in all of the gears. I am grateful for the people in my life whose feedback does sit at 80, 85, 90%.
Okay. Cool.
Because there are people whose feedback is weighted there. And it's a carefully curated, small collection of people. Mm-hmm. And those are the people that I internally have decided I can trust to help kind of steer the ship a little. Mm-hmm. Because time and time again, when I listen to their feedback, things are only improved. And so I'm grateful for those people. I'm going to leave it right there.
Okay. Cool.
What are you grateful for?
I am grateful for my son's school. He does not go to a traditional public school, and I just really like their methods. I like their practices. They kind of buck the system a little bit, but he is like growing and thriving in leaps and bounds. And it's kind of difficult to trust the process in the beginning because it's outside the norm a little bit, but I'm just grateful that I did, because I feel like I listened to myself on it, my body, instead of my head, in the decision in putting him there. And of course, because I listened to my body and it said yes, it's been the right move. So yeah, I'm just really super grateful for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I was going to say something, and I realized it's something we've said 1,000 times on this podcast already. Listening to your body instead of your head, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just cool to see that that's put into practice, and it yielded, you being in a good place, and, of course it did. That's what happens when we listen to our body. So
well, and that's why I teach it as a tool. I don't just teach it. I actually use it all the time, from everything from should I have coffee or tea today to should I put my son in this school or not. Like, the body compass tool is incredibly insightful. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, this may be the shortest episode ever recorded in True North history.
That's quite all right.
Fine with me.
Yeah.
All right, well, until next time, dear everybody who is still hanging with us, thank you for loving me. Thank you for being there.
Bye. We are grateful for you. Thank you for listening. And if you like what we're doing and you want more, then you can join our tribe to interact with other like-minded individuals. You can go through our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/True North Podcast 11.
Is it Podcast 11 or is it True North 11?
Oh, shit.
It's in our show notes. If you want more than that, you want some more hands-on healing stuff that we do, I do actual energy healing and body work, and Abby does life coaching and workshops. You can find the URLs in our show notes when we figure out what they are. Mm-hmm.
And we are always trying to increase our reach and bring more people to find their true north. So we would really appreciate it if you could leave a review and rate it in whatever podcast platform you use.
Done. That's perfect.
What about the gratitude?
Hang on. And one last thing. What are you grateful for? There. I said it. I said the thing.